Hello, welcome to the Go for Ball podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Scott Mayo. We got Sports 25 to life. And as we do each week, talking about the hitters that are trending up, trending down, who it's too late for, who might still be able to turn things around. So, as we always do, we're going to start here at catcher, where it's still not even close. Buster Posey just continues to distance himself from the field. Now up to 331 on the season. I mean, I'm not going to say we were concerned about him, but he was certainly off to a slow start this season. And, I mean, this guy's just absolutely been destroying the ball ever since then. Up to 16 homers, 75 RBIs, walking 9.4% of the time, striking out just 8%. This is vintage Buster Posey right now. This is about as good as it gets at catcher.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one else really even close. The rest of these guys that are even qualified have all been struggling. Vogel's down to 260, McCann's down to 254, Russell Martin's down to 254, Salvador Perez, it feels like he hasn't hit a home run in 3 years.
Yep.
Wilson Ramos is even down all the way to 241, and he was having a decent batting average season for a while there. Derek Norris is down to 238. Mike Zunino has found a way to go even further below 200, down to 175. I mean, it's just been a rough year for catchers, and there's so much platooning and stuff going on that it's hard to really lock in on any of these catchers because they don't play every day. Most of them don't even play like 3 or 4 out of every 5 days. So it's just been a really tough position. There's been a decent amount of power at it, though. I mean, there's 9 catchers with double-digit home runs, which isn't saying a ton at this point in the season, but I mean, you can look at a guy like Yadier Molina, who's second in batting average at 282, but only has 2 home runs and 26 runs scored on the entire season. He's one of the few that does play almost every day.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's been really tough. And even Posey, the one guy who's been consistent, I mean, his price has been indicative of his recent performance. It's been slowly creeping up. I mean, he's up near 5K on both sites most nights. So, I mean,
right.
Even you'd love to play him in your cash games, but it's tough to do with a decent lineup around him. So, pretty much, you just play the matchup, play the platoon guy, see who's cheap, and I mean that's how catcher's been going recently. All right, first base options once again here. A little bit has changed over the past week. It's still Paul Goldschmidt at the top, and it's not particularly close. He's up to 339, 22 homers, 78 RBIs, 19 stolen bases now, walking almost 18% of the time. He's one of the few guys in all of baseball that no pitcher wants to see at the plate in any situation. I mean, he just continues to be the best play. And on FanDuel, he's grossly underpriced right now, down right around 4K and has been for about a week. Struggled for a few games, but I can't imagine that justifying his low price tag. So I've been taking advantage of it while I can. Yep. And the other guy who was up there for a little while, starting to turn around, having a huge couple weeks right now, Anthony Rizzo, up to 21 homers, 63 RBIs, 15 stolen bases for him also, up to 297. He's the guy that, what was it, probably 3 to 4 weeks, it was almost unplayable. His price got down to really cheap, but he was just really struggling. Turned it right around, and then I think he hit 5 home runs in a week span, something like that. So he's up there, and his price is still pretty cheap as well, at least on FanDuel, considering his recent production.
Yeah, another guy that's been really hot lately, Eric Hosmer's batting average is up to 320. He doesn't quite give you the power you really want at first base with only 11 home runs. But he does have 63 runs scored, 58 RBI, 4 stolen bases on the year. He's just not the power guy you really look for at first base. But, I mean, he's been rock solid since the All-Star break. He's hitting 347 since then to get that batting average up to 320 for the season. It's not like he was bad for any point in the season, really, batting average-wise, but he's just been red hot lately. And he's become kind of an interesting guy just because of the Royals' offense being pretty productive as a whole. Another guy that's been pretty hot, Jose Abreu, up to 295 with 19 home runs now, 60-plus RBI and runs scored. Still striking out a ton, but his ISO's back up over 200 at 207, on-base percentage at 353. He's been rock solid lately.
Yeah, and that whole White Sox team went through that stretch over the past couple weeks where they're just mashing the ball. Obviously, that's not going to continue, but Jose Abreu, definitely the spark plug of that offense. And a couple other guys. One guy that at least I was almost certain was going to get dealt by the trade deadline, Adam Lind. Still having a fine season. He's a great play against righties, and had a little stretch there where he struggled, so his price is a little bit depressed right now as well. But then you look down a little bit past these guys, and you see a bunch of guys that are mostly GPP options, but one guy surprisingly done really well in lefty-lefty matchups this year and up to 28 home runs now. Chris Davis has been one of the better first base options recently. He's still striking out at a ridiculous 31.2% clip. But, I mean, when he's making contact, he is making really hard contact. 269 ISO on the season. So he's definitely one of those guys. Seems more of a GPP play, but, I mean, he's shown some consistency. And really, it's just his high price that's been holding him back from being a cash game play for me.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a 269 ISO. The only person he's behind, I want to say, is Teixeira, who has a ridiculous 308 ISO on the year. I mean, that's just incredible for a guy hitting, 266 or something like that? Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just been fantastic. 29 home runs. Both Teixeira and Chris Davis are over 70 RBI. They're the only two guys outside of those top two in batting average that we've talked about, Posey and Goldschmidt, over the last two positions. I mean, they're just absolutely crushing it. Pujols is another guy kind of sitting around down here. Only 227 batting average on balls in play now, leading to a 257 batting average, but 30 home runs, 66 RBI. You got to think the batting average is going to rise at some point. I mean, we keep saying that, but I mean, he can't possibly hit 227 on batting average on balls in play with the way he's hitting the ball. I mean, he's got a 262 ISO too, and somehow all of his questionable hits are getting caught. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. They must be just not counting balls that hit the seats as batting average on balls in play, because technically they're not in play.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty interesting season for some of these guys. Another guy that has been hitting a decent amount of home runs, Ryan Howard has 18 home runs and 62 RBIs now. Only 238 on the year, but he's been surprisingly serviceable for a guy that looked like he was totally done at the end of last year.
Yeah, and I mean, the Phillies now all of a sudden, they're not an everyday target by any means, but they've been putting up some decent numbers against solid pitchers. No one really standing out as far as that lineup goes, but definitely some really good team offense recently for them. So, Ryan Howard's still priced like a guy that was struggling like he was early in the season. So I like him as a GPP option a lot of nights. And then the guy that I think is the worst first baseman, as far as regular first baseman right now, is Adam LaRoche. I mean, he's been horrible over the past probably 4 or 5 weeks now. I was looking at his game logs the other day, and I want to say he had 9 straight games with at least 2 strikeouts. I mean, he's been just awful recently. He's the guy that you see him at men's salary and you consider him. You say maybe I'll throw him in there in GPP, but there's really no upside with Adam LaRoche right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's just been awful. As someone who lives in Chicago and watches a ton of White Sox games, he's not someone you want to put on your team and watch his at-bats right now.
Yeah, you tend to think that you could at least put the ball in play. I mean, maybe a weak ground out to the pitcher or something.
Yeah, he's been rough.
Yeah,
it just looks like he has no confidence at this point. He hasn't been hitting all season.
Yeah, I mean, ever since he hit his 50th birthday, it seems like, I mean, obviously not actually 50, but you know what I mean. He's just been, it's been a struggle for him in a big-time way recently. Second base options, D. Gordon is your highest batting average at second base. 34 stolen bases, obviously only 1 home run. That ball, in case you're wondering, did not leave the park. It was an inside-the-park home run. He's a guy who doesn't walk much, which you don't like at 3.1%, especially for a leadoff hitter. Actually, ridiculously low for a leadoff hitter. But he's one of those guys, once he gets on, especially against a team that's not good at throwing out runners, I mean, you got to like his chances. But a 329 WOBA for a guy batting 330 is just pretty ridiculous, especially for a leadoff guy. So you hate that, but you like his upside. Jason Kipnis, unfortunately, on the DL right now, but he's having a great season. And then you look at the guys behind him. One guy in particular really starting to get it going, but he was never really all that cheap, only for a few days there. Ian Kinsler, up to 296 on the season. Not a ton of power still, just 6 home runs, but he scored 67 runs for an offense that's really been struggling since Cabrera went down and now Cespedes out of town. But he's one of those guys that makes for a really nice GPP play a lot of nights because tends to fly under the radar because that offense is not producing.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned, I mean, he's having a pretty decent year, 67 runs, scored 50 RBI. Obviously, it hurts right now with some of these guys gone, Cabrera banged up. But, I mean, he's been pretty good all year. Like you said, the price went down for a little while he was struggling a little bit, but he's been more of a cash game play than GPP play for me, honestly, just because, I mean, there's just not a ton of power upside there anymore like there used to be when he was having 20 home run seasons from the second base position.
Yep.
But speaking of guys who have a chance at a 20 home run season from the second base position, Logan Forsythe has been really hot lately. He's up to 280 on the year, 13 home runs, 50 RBI. He's just been really, really good lately, and the Rays offense has been coming around a little bit with him hitting near the top. I mean, there's just not a lot to love for the Rays, but he's been a real nice bright spot for them.
Yeah, especially against lefties. I mean, he's one of those guys where you get a short slate, you get your cash games, you can go ahead and slot in Logan Forsythe and Evan Longoria, both guys pretty cheap, and then just kind of move on, especially on FanDuel where they've been really cheap recently. So outside of those guys, if we're talking about guys down here at the bottom, there's really not much to see. No one here that you really want to play other than Brian Dozier, who, I mean, he's just your de facto top-notch play at second base most nights because he has so much power, 245 ISO. You compare that to the rest of these guys. I mean, it's right around double to triple most of these guys ISO. So if you're chasing the big upside, 23 home runs with Brian Dozier, that's definitely the way you go most nights.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, shortstop options. Troy Tulowitzki, as you know, has made his move to the American League now, joining what was already the best offense in baseball in Toronto and a great hitter's park. It's not quite Coors Field, but you got to love that. He's batting 301 in the season. His overall numbers aren't particularly impressive for the player that we know he is, but tend to think he's going to add to those, especially the run totals for the rest of the season. Obviously, batting leadoff, not going to have quite as many RBI opportunities as he did in Colorado, but certainly a lot of run opportunities. I mean, even the bottom of that order producing right now, so you got to like that. And then below him, there's been a couple guys who have been good hitters, but not great hitters, like Alcides Escobar, batting 275. He's been pretty much men's salary the entire season on FanDuel, so he's been like the go-to cash game play if you need somebody cheap.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's hasn't been a lot to love at shortstop, but some of these guys are having decent seasons. We've seen some power come from like some unexpected spots, like Wilmer Flores and Marcus Semien and stuff like that. But nothing too special at shortstop, really, overall.
No, not really. It's one of those positions where if you're not paying up for a guy like Tulowitzki, then you're paying for a guy like Carlos Correa. I mean, he's the guy that, I mean, he's having a ridiculously good season. He's already leading AL shortstops in home runs, and I believe he's only played, 73 games now. He's got 14 home runs already. Monster season for him. So it seems like most nights if you're paying up, you're going Tulo or you're going Correa, or you're probably just punting. Maybe Johnny Peralta is your mid-tier guy there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's been a pretty solid cash game play all year.
Yep. Moving over to third base, where it's the Josh Donaldson show. Somehow he's batting 295. I feel like watching him and rostering him, he's a guy that's batting like 450, it seems like. I mean, he just continues to destroy the ball. 29 homers, 79 runs scored, 81 RBIs. And now you add Troy Tulowitzki right ahead of him. So I'm sure that's going to help his numbers moving forward. 274 ISO, numbers even higher against lefties. Just having a ridiculously good season. And right behind him, Manny Machado, 291 batting average, 23 homers, 15 stolen bases, and 68 runs scored for him. He's moved around the lineup a little bit, now kind of settling in. Usually right around 1 to 3 in the lineup. So you don't know where he's going to bat, but either way, you like it. You like the prospects for Manny Machado more often than not.
Yeah, I mean, he's been fantastic at the top of the order. I was surprised he ended up being so good as a leadoff hitter, but I mean, he's just been really impressive against lefties and righties. He's just been crushing both. I mean, he looked like a guy that was just going to have power when he was over the last couple seasons, and he's just been so much more than that this year.
Yeah, he's definitely been a phenomenal all-around player. One guy who was having a real nice stretch there for a while, still a ton of power, Nolan Arenado, 280 ISO, 26 homers, 80 RBI in the season, but especially with Troy Tulowitzki out of town, not seeing as many pitches as you'd like him to. There's not a whole lot of protection in that lineup now because for the most part you got Carlos Gonzalez and him, and there's not a whole lot else in that lineup. So that definitely hurts his prospects moving forward. A couple other guys to mention. Matt Carpenter showing his power upside recently. 197 ISO now, up to 15 homers, 63 runs scored. He's a guy who had that, I can't remember what they called it. They called it extreme fatigue. There was some term for it, but sat out a couple games, struggled there for a few weeks. But, I mean, over the past 2 weeks, he's been, outside of Josh Donaldson and Manny Machado, probably the best, most consistent third base option. And I think those three kind of head and shoulders above the rest in that time period.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I mean, third base has been a really, really strong position all year. I mean, there's some of these guys towards the bottom that have had some power and stuff like that. Like Aramis Ramirez has shown some power at times with 11 home runs. Obviously, we talk about Luis Valbuena all the time with 20 home runs on the season, but he's only hitting 209. I mean, even Brett Lowry was having some decent games for the A's, and he's up to 272 batting average now with 10 home runs. He's been more and more serviceable lately. And then at the very bottom, I mean, there's nothing like there's no one at third base that's been just like absolutely terrible, because like the guys that are the worst in qualified batting average have been Valbuena and Aramis Ramirez, and they both put up decent power numbers on the year. They both drove in 40 plus runs. David Freese, another guy that you could probably throw into that's been struggling a little bit, but he's got 11 home runs, 43 RBI, hitting 240 now on the season.
Yeah. So like you said, and then Chris Bryant's the other guy you mentioned. I mean, he's had that nice start, and then he's striking out almost 31% of the time. He's not hitting for average at 246 somehow with a 341 batting average on balls in play. So that cheap price tag has been tempting, but I've been for the most part staying away because he's looked lost over the past probably month. All right, moving over to the outfield now. No surprise that Bryce Harper is atop. It might seem like from a DFS perspective he's been struggling recently, which I guess he has if you factor in his price. But as far as an everyday baseball player, so he's still been on a great stretch. Batting .334, 18.5% walk rate, which is absolutely incredible. 29 homers, 68 RBIs. But the home runs have really slowed down over the past month or so. Both Nelson Cruz and Mike Trout have passed him. And speaking of Cruz, he's got that 273 ISO. Obviously just finished that series in Coors Field where he homered in all but one game. I mean, the guy's just absolutely locked in right now. It was for a while where you target him against lefties. He had that little stretch where he struggled, but you're playing Nelson Cruz against everyone right now outside of the most elite arms. And even those guys, I mean, you still feel like you want to get some exposure at times.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of another guy that's been really good against lefties and good overall, Lorenzo Cain has been hot again lately. Up to 68 runs scored, 46 RBI, 19 steals, 11 home runs. He's just been doing it all.
Yeah, I like him. And then another guy to mention, I like playing him in cash games even when he's away from Coors Field at the top of that order. Charlie Blackmon, a guy that's really versatile. Got, 176 ISO, 29 stolen bases on the year, 65 runs scored. Obviously, the 46 RBI are a product of him being a leadoff hitter, but he's a guy that I really like to play quite a bit. And then J.D. Martinez as well. He's one of those guys that doesn't get mentioned that often as an elite power hitter, but he's really, over the past year and a half, I guess you would say, really shown that he is one. 29 homers now, 71 RBIs, 267 ISO, and batting .287. So, I mean, he's putting up numbers that aren't quite Trout and Pujols, or not Trout and Pujols, Trout and Harper, but I mean, he's not that far behind these guys this year.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, he's just been really surprisingly good. Another guy that is putting up some really nice numbers now that he's been really hot since the All-Star break, Carlos Gonzalez for the Rockies, is up to 22 home runs, 56 RBI. He's quite a few plate appearances, like 40 to 60 behind some of these other top guys. But he's been red hot lately. 279 batting average on the season after he was floating around at 255, 260 for quite a while. You'd like to see more stolen bases out of a guy with his speed since he is only 2, but he's been much, much better lately. Ryan Braun, another guy that's kind of in that same situation, hasn't been as good as he's been in the past, but he's putting together a pretty serviceable season at 273, 19 home runs, 16 steals, 60-plus RBI and runs scored. Both of those guys having really strong comeback seasons here.
Yeah, and it seems like the biggest problem with Braun now is, I mean, he's producing, but now with 3 key pieces of that lineup dealt out of town, I mean, his overall prospects certainly take a little bit of a hit there, so that's unfortunate for him. And then you look at the guys who are struggling. Jock Peterson, one of them in particular, now down 7-8 in the lineup, depending on when you're looking. He's got his ISO now higher than his batting average, 227 to 221, but I don't think he's hit a home run in a couple weeks now. I mean, he's not even making good contacts. That's a big concern. And then one guy who's down here you feel like he shouldn't be, Jose Bautista. He's got 24 homers, 69 runs scored, 76 RBIs, but he's the number 51 qualified hitter out of 55 in the outfield. And, I mean, the thing with him is his batting average on balls in play is 219, batting just 234, but he's got a 367 WOBA, which is an elite number. So it's one of those things where it's confusing if you look at these numbers. Some of them don't look good, but, I mean, overall, he's still having a really good season.
Yeah, definitely. You can say a lot of the same stuff about who's I just going to talk about here? Oh, Jay Bruce is a guy that fits into that scenario for me also. 17 home runs isn't quite as good, but he's a guy with a 335 on base percentage despite only batting 253. His WOBA's 347, 226 ISO. Bruce has been much better lately. I'm kind of surprised somebody didn't acquire him at the trade deadline. But I mean, he's a guy towards the bottom here that is really having a pretty decent season overall.
Yeah. One more guy I'll throw in that mix before we get out of here is Justin Upton. 18 homers, 17 stolen bases, 57 RBIs. And this for an offense that's just been really, really bad overall. He's got a 181 ISO. He's only batting 248. But 326 WOBA is not bad. Problem just is really the consistency. And I mean, that Padres offense, you even see Matt Kemp down here having a bad season as well. So, I mean, it's been Justin Upton's been the lone bright spot there. But you can't carry the entire offense on your back. He's not Mike Trout or Bryce Harper.
Yeah, exactly.
Excuse me. That's going to wrap things up for us then. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.